Part 2. We are still on the 9th of September 2020, Part 2, Anthropology, afternoon group. I'm talking about Evans Pritchard. And so Evans Pritchard went to study the Nua at the behest of the government and with reluctance. What does that mean? I mean, he was an anthropologist. He wanted to do anthropology, wanted to do it, and he had done work with the Azande, I believe, and only because the government needed help. So in 1930 he arrived among the Nua on the heels of a punitive expedition. What does that mean, a punitive expedition? The army. He came in after the army had been into Nua land, or some military anyway, an expedition of the military. What problem do you have in the back? Some animals or insect? Insect. Okay. Don't kill it. Okay, so he arrives on the heels of a punitive military expedition. And he was there to help the people, help them settle down. What does it mean? So the Nua have been fighting against the government. They do not want the British colonial government to be in charge. They want their freedom, their independence. Imagine that. They want their freedom. They're refusing to settle down. And the military comes in, and that's the only mention, though, that Evans Pritchard makes, really, of the military in the book. I mean, in the introduction, he tells us that the military came looking for the prophets of a rebel group. A prophet is like a religious leader character, like a shaman. From last week, we talked about shamans 2 weeks ago. Like a holy but political leader, a witch doctor in the old sense. Okay, and they came looking for them. But in a 1983 interview, Evans Pritchard said that he's joined this in a way that's very similar to Malinowski coming to the Trobriand Islands. Remember, Malinowski was there because of World War I, and with permission of Governor Hunt, the Australian Governor General, because that would help with native administration. Now, in a similar way, Evans Pritchard joins at the request of Harold McMichael from the Home Office. They have a correspondence, and he goes to help the Nua settle down, i.e. become a pacified tribe, no longer to resist. Something like a protected village. But Evans Pritchard does not mention this in the book, except in the intro in a small way, as we'll see. I quote it. But that's really weird, because remember what I said about assumptions and comparison. Your values and your assumptions really matter when you're describing something. So if you are describing a people that have just been subject to military pacification, what are they going to tell you? It's like similar to going to a former prison island and asking those people to tell you. Not even former, a current prison island, like Radcliffe Brown did on the Andaman Islands, to go there and interview the prisoners. What will the prisoners say to the anthropologist that's there from the country that made the prison? Not the truth, not much anyway. You don't give away your information to the oppressor. But, and here's the catch, in the book the Noah, there is this picture. And this picture and the caption tell us a lot, even when Evans Pritchard doesn't tell us. The picture is an Air Force official Crown copyright Air Force surveillance map picture, Air Force surveillance picture. How do you get such a picture? This kind of photograph made by the Air Force, it turns out that we know subsequently that this was from the time when the Air Force was bombing the Nua, pacifying a tribal group with bombs. And I don't know if they look like villages or bomb craters, but we do know that this is a photograph taken by the Air Force at the time, the same time, that they were bombing to pacify, to control, to dominate the Nua. The Nua are subject to a political regime called colonialism, and they are bombed into pacification, and the anthropologist is there and doesn't mention it in his book. I find that shocking, but also typical. So we do hear at the introduction of the book that the Nua camp was raided by the government, the military, and they were looking for the leopard skin chief, the leaders of a recent revolt. The government took some hostages. The government took hostages from the tribe. And Evans Pritchard felt that his position was not tenable. He felt equivocal. So he left the field for 6 months. He went away. But after 6 months, he came back because things were peaceful. But he doesn't really, beyond that, he doesn't mention this, and this does not affect his interpretation. Now, it's his interpretation that's really quite elaborate. This is his little story. I'm sorry, I didn't translate this one. This is where he arrives, right? This is his arrival story. Remember Malinowski? I arrived, surrounded, imagine yourself set down, surrounded by your gear as the boat that left you in the island sails away. And he pretended he was on his own. Well, Evans Pritchard, he doesn't do that, but he tells us how hard it was to get to there. Right? He was left in Marseille. He didn't get his... He, unlike most readers, he knows the Nua, and so he must judge his work severely, but he has overcome so many hardships, overcome so much, please, to get to Nualand. Stormy weather, he lost his luggage, his food was delayed, the carriers that he had been promised only 4 of them arrived, not 9, or something like that. By the 10th day, only 4 had arrived. On the following morning, he set out to the village of Pakur, where the carriers dropped his tent and stores in the sun, not over in the shade. Oh, poor anthropologist. Had to do so much hard work. Okay, so he's telling us this story to prove that his knowledge is really hard won. He had to battle to put up his tent for a whole day. Okay, slightly problematic. But you know, he did get to know this leopard skin chief. This is the most colorful, exotic photo or whatever, the leopard skin chief. The character is easy to separate out, but he was one of the leaders of the rebel group, right? Whether or not he was taken hostage, we don't know. But it's what Evans Pritchard manages to tell us. Now, any anthropological work is not just the photographs. And I have presented to you so far only the photographs. I want to present the theoretical argument that he gives. Okay? But the pictures that you saw of man, youth, and the women and the cattle, they are a part of his theoretical presentation. But also keep in mind that the book was published in 1940. So if a book is published in 1940 with so many pictures, in those days, a year or more to be published. So 1940, 1939 must have gone to the publisher. That means written 1938. Maybe 37 even, but probably 38. So what was going on in 1938 in Europe should be in the back of your mind. But let me describe what he did. And I think I can use examples from Vietnam to explain this. Okay, who here, most of you are women, yeah? Which of you women have a brother about the same age as you? Anyone? You've got a brother? Okay, so do you fight with him sometimes? When you were a kid, you fought with him. Yes. So anyone else? Got a brother? You fight with him all the time, but you love him as well? Oh, maybe not. Okay, but right, you understand this. 2 members of a family. I don't know why the boy has such a big head. Sorry. They will fight, but they fight from inside the house, right? But that boy or that girl are challenged by someone from outside, fight them, these 2 will come together and fight the other 2. You look after your family, right? So Evans Pritchard builds this into a theory called segmentation. Segmentation or lineage and alliances. Okay? You know what a lineage is? Okay. Do you have mother, father, right? Grandmother, grandfather, great-grandmother? Do you know who they were? Do you remember? Do you have photo or history? Okay, someone else? Do you know your Mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, great-grandfather. Can you tell me their name, or does your family know their name? Amit? Okay, you? You know what I mean? So you've got father, mother. You've got grandmother, grandfather. They had a mother and father. Your great-grandmother, great-grandfather. And then further back, great-great-grandmother, grandfather. You know who they are? I mean, they are dead now already, passed away. Ancestors. Anyone who knows who their family's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was? Right back? No? Okay, sometimes you in a class you'll find some people who do know that. Anyway, that process, ego, parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, that is lineage. We call that lineage, the line that you come from, your family line. And we draw it in a kinship diagram, right? It can look like that. And there'll be some old great-grandparent progenitor, okay? So Evans Pritchard's making segmental lineage alliance theory. A fights with B, but A and B fight with C and D. They have classified themselves as a unit. Previously, it was one unit, now it's one unit, one unit. But then, from another family, comes a group from the other side of the village, and they pick a fight. So then this group joins together as one group, and they fight against this group. Yeah, you understand that, of course. You and your neighbors against the people from the other street, or the people who all live in District 7 versus those people who live in District 2. Let's go and get them. They're horrible. Maybe not district like that, but you understand the process. I might be fighting with my sister, but if you go near us, we will fight you. But if our group are attacked by outside, our group will fight to defend ourselves. And this goes up for Evans Pritchard, bigger and bigger and bigger to the whole village, and then the whole of the Nua. So this whole village will fight in one unit against the people that live on the other side of the mountain or something like that. And he calls this a segmental lineage and alliance system. So your alliance changes according to context. Easy enough to understand. Okay? Someone from Ho Chi Minh City. You were born here, you're proud of the city? A bit. Okay? Compared to another city, Kanto or something like that, you think Ho Chi Minh City got better stuff, or compared to Da Nang. We don't have COVID, they do, something like that. Right? But, Kanto, say it was Kanto. If you're from Mekong and from the south, and someone says, oh no, Hanoi is a better city, you say, no, you don't have modern things like we have, and all that old stuff and government, and right? But the people in Hanoi, they will, they will fight, they will argue. Okay? But then if someone from Taipei says Taipei is a better city, the people from Ho Chi Minh or from Hanoi will say, no, Vietnam has better cities. Better than Taipei, which is just so American. You got baseball. You got completely sucked into America. commercial and doesn't have good food, just boiled frogs, or something like that. But then somebody else comes along and says, oh, no, New York and Paris are better. Then you say, no, Asian cities are better. Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Taipei, Beijing, we have better cities than those old colonial centers. So do you see how your identity changed according to the context? First you were from Hanoi, then you were from Vietnam, then you were from Asia. And, okay, we can't go any more than that because we'd have to have another planet, but there's a process of lineage segmentation alliance. Why did Evans Pritchard write this at that time? At that time, you have an opposition building up between the Axis powers, Germany and Italy and Japan, versus the old colonial powers of England, France, Poland, Czechoslovakia, USA. And England was saying, yes, we have often fought with the French. You know, they had dozens of wars with the French. England and France fought in India. England and France fought wars together. They fought Battle of Agincourt. Okay? They fought so many battles. Yeah, thank you. But when the fascist powers started to rise up, the English were saying, no, the English and the French will fight against you Germans if you threaten our livelihood. Not only that, when Germany then invaded Czechoslovakia and Austria and got the support of Italy, England actually made an alliance with the communists of Soviet Russia. The Soviet Union and England were on the same side. And even the Soviet Union and America had to even remember that that was true. So Evans Pritchard's book, even though it was about the NUA, kind of was also a commentary about what was happening in Europe. They were the more or less hidden assumptions of his theoretical argument. Now, of course, that's not all that happened. And by 1940, the book came out and it made sense, but there was still pressure. The Americans did not enter the war until 1943 because they were making the Soviet Union weak by doing that. Soviet Union lost 25 million people fighting that war, right? And they still won. And without the Soviet Union, the Allies side would not have won. But Evans Pritchard's book is weird. It's about Africa and it's about a small village in Africa, but it's also about generalized to the whole world. Now, what happened afterwards is different, right? After the war, after 1945, of course, the British then said, no, this alliance with the Soviet cannot stand. They brought down the so-called Iron Curtain, right? That's the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain is a phrase from Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, who was out of power by then, he said, the threat is from the Soviet Union. They are bringing down the Iron Curtain, and they are behind that Iron Curtain, which we cannot see. They are making plans to destroy us. And of course, nuclear stuff was part of it. And the Soviet bloc became the other side in the Cold War. And of course, Vietnam, newly independent, 1945, August, right? Having fought off the Japanese and the French that were in an alliance. There's another example of alliance segmentation. The French saw the advantage in being allied with the Japanese. And even after the war, Japan had surrendered, but the military was still there, and the English military came in and tried to help the Japanese, help the French get back into power. But the Iron Curtain was found in Europe, but in Vietnam you had the bamboo curtain, which is kind of a bit Nixon's funny, because you can't make curtains out of, well, you can make blinds out of bamboo, but when you make curtains, it's not, I suppose you probably can make a material, but we don't. Anyway, but what the World War II really had as a consequence in terms of alliance and segmentation, Japan had defeated the colonial powers, even if only briefly, in the Dutch in Indonesia, the English in India, Burma, Singapore, Malaysia, and the French were all defeated by Asian people. The English, the French, the Dutch were shown not to be superior, not to be able to win every time. So that gave energy and motivation and fuel and opportunity to the Asian independent powers. And in the next generation, for 20, 25 years, there was a series of freedom movements, independent movements, where Asian people got their national liberation. First, Vietnam, August 1945. Then, August 1947, who? August 1947, who got independence? Come on. Your own history. India. August 1957, August 15th. Clock hands join palms at 12 midnight while the world sleeps. Blah, blah, blah. Also Pakistan, the same, the next day. 1949. China. China, yes. 50s, Indonesia. 53, Algeria. 54, Angola. 59, Cuba. Right up to 1975, East Timor from the Portuguese. After the Portuguese revolution in Portugal, the left movement. Yeah. So, you know, the segmentation thing kind of got lost in that process, but you can understand that series of Asian independence movements as being helped by that association of seeing that our Japanese brothers, even though they were the colonial power here, they were still able to defeat, and in Taiwan, they were still able to defeat the European powers. And that was a welcome lesson. So yeah, the Japanese, by breaking up the European colonial system, advancing the cause of nationalism in Southeast Asia, they injected new confidence in the natives. This is quoting Mackintosh, right? And it will be next to impossible for them to go back to their old way of life. This is MacDonald in 1947. The British, French and Dutch have no positive program to offer these people who witnessed the defeat of the European colonialists at the hands of the Japanese. The United States has a backlog of prestige over here now because they helped. But the generalities of our foreign policy must be made specific or we will soon lose this prestige. And in fact, they did because they invaded Vietnam. Well, Korea, then Vietnam. All right, it was only a police action. They were only supporting the French. But then America changed and they became belligerent. I found this interesting map. I'm trying to study and work out what's going on here. I don't yet know. On this side at the top, you have John Bull, the English millionaire. On the other side, American Mr. Moneybags. You can see flags of different colonial powers. French, Spanish, Japanese. Anyway. The thing is that this war changed the way even that anthropology worked. Before the war, Evans Pritchard was reluctant to help the war effort. But for leftists and for anthropologists in Europe and America, the fight against fascism was a good war. They wanted to fight. And so people like Ruth Benedict after the war I've not mentioned Benedict was an American anthropologist, teacher of Margaret Mead, and she did an anthropological study of Japan for the American Army occupation of Japan. So using anthropologists to help with the colonial occupation. Remember, America colonized Japan with its army. But the thing is, if you persist with this, I will confiscate phones. Yeah. So Ruth Benedict, instead of having a look for herself in Japan, she wrote a study of what information she could get from prisoners of Japanese descent in American jails. America locked Japanese up during the war and she interviewed them to talk about Japan. And the American army then used that information for its occupation of Japan. Now this is very important and significant change, and I will talk about this in anthropology. Previously, Evans Pritchard had not wanted to work for the army, but he did anyway. In the war, he even fought using the tribesmen. If you had done the homework, you would know. But Condamine that I mentioned before, remember? This Vietnamese, well, his mother was Vietnamese, he was Vietnamese, father was French, but he grew up here. Vietnamese anthropologist. He wrote a book called We Eat the Forest about the Jerai in Highland. And this book was translated without his permission by the CIA for the Americans to use in the battles against Viet Cong, Viet Minh in the highland areas. They translated the work of an anthropologist without getting permission from that anthropologist. He found out later. The CIA translated his book so they could use it in jungle warfare. So interesting, so terrible. I mean, he didn't want them to. Afterwards, he was upset about it. Of course, but they used it to understand the hearts and minds of the Highlanders and recruit them to fight against the revolutionary forces. We'll talk more about that one, Condominus, and the role of the CIA anthropology in, not next week, but 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I can't remember. Next week, we are reading the work of a French anthropologist, Claude Lévi-Strauss. Not the blue jeans guy, but Lévi-Strauss nonetheless. You should enjoy his book. Please, I get your attention for the end. Absolutely important that you do the reading before the class. It will not make sense if you do not. Do your reading this week and do a personal report. Doesn't have to be a summary, should not be a summary. What you think of the content of the reading. You can make mistakes in English. I will help. I will correct your English. Write it in English if you can. No, even if you can't, try and write it in English. Because I will help you with that. It's not my job, but it's part of it. Why not? Much better than risking reputation and doing that shorthand that helps no one of copying. Okay? Thank you very much. See you next week. And that will be the end for now. Stop recording.